The Siege of Yorktown in 1781 was not a spontaneous victory, but a meticulously planned strategic trap. We must analyze the core secret. How did the American commander manipulate his stronger foe into a fatal corner? For years, the general sought to capture New York, the central nerve of the British military presence in the colonies. However, the French commander understood that the defenses of that city were simply too formidable to overcome successfully. This initial strategic divergence created the opportunity for the most critical deception of the Revolutionary War era. The French commander secretly directed the admiral's massive fleet toward Chesapeake Bay, not towards the harbor in New York. This forced the American commander's hand, compelling him to abandon the original years-long northern objective decisively. This sudden shift required the concealment of nearly 15,000 Allied troops, traveling 450 miles to the southern theater of operations. To neutralize the command in New York, the general meticulously maintained the fiction of an imminent massive siege upon Manhattan Island. Dummy camps were skillfully constructed and filled with consistent activity for British spies and patrols to observe closely. Boats for potential river crossings were conspicuously built, reinforcing the British chief's profound fear of an attack in New York. This psychological warfare succeeded in paralyzing the British command, preventing any timely intervention or swift reinforcement to the south. Meanwhile, the British Earl leading the Southern Command failed to gain control of North Carolina and marched north into Virginia. The Earl, having burned his bridges behind him, chose Yorktown on a high promontory reliant on naval supremacy for survival. This critical geographical decision made the British position an inescapable death trap if sea power were ever lost completely. The historical strategist must ask, why did the command in New York not immediately support the vulnerable British Earl in Virginia? The British chief was completely convinced until the last moment that the main Allied target remained his own forces in New York. The crucial element arrived at the end of August. The French fleet commander, with 26 powerful ships of the line, was present. The decisive turning point was not a siege battle on land, but a pivotal naval engagement, the Battle of the Capes. The superior size of the French admiral's fleet was the key factor ensuring that the British Earl was utterly cut off by sea. Though the ensuing battle saw no clear winner, the subsequent British retreat north sealed the fate of the trapped army in Yorktown. Barras, commanding a smaller French squadron, skillfully slipped into Chesapeake Bay under the protection of the larger fleet. This smaller squadron transported the heavy French siege guns and vital salt provisions necessary for the prolonged successful campaign. Thus, the trap was fully sprung. The British Earl was blockaded by the massive French fleet commander and surrounded on land. The Allied army, now totaling 19,000 men, faced the British Earl's 7,000 troops, creating an overwhelming, insurmountable strategic advantage. The young Marquis, Washington's protege, played a vital role keeping the British Earl engaged and trapped on the peninsula until the Allies arrived. The American commander had never won a major battle. Yorktown offered an unparalleled opportunity for decisive total military victory. The siege followed the rigorous established protocol of Marshal Vauban, utilizing parallel trenches dug ever closer under the cover of night. The goal was not a frontal assault, but continuous demoralizing bombardment breaching defenses at minimal cost to the Allied forces. The British Earl initially abandoned the outer works, a move critics deemed unmilitary, but intended to shorten his defensive line. This tactical retreat, however, gifted the Allied forces highly advantageous ground, guaranteeing the severe devastation of the town itself. We see the relentless logic of war cannons pounded ceaselessly, transforming the landscape into a ruined, inescapable muddy morass. Red-hot cannonballs were deliberately aimed at ships in the harbor, successfully burning 2 British vessels, completely in spectacular fashion. The Allied bombardment was so intense that the British troops found refuge nowhere observing houses, riddled by constant cannon fire. The defense faltered when the British Earl was forced to shoot nearly 400 horses due to the desperate lack of forage. The British works, hastily constructed, could not withstand the combined fire from approximately 52 heavy French and American artillery pieces. We question the core strategic error. Should the British Earl have tried a breakout, risking everything, instead of waiting for a promised rescue? Tarleton correctly assessed that an aggressive attack was the only hope for survival, but the Earl was persuaded to hold his defensive post. The capture of two critical outlying redoubts by the French and American light infantry brought the second parallel line dangerously close. This forced the British Earl's desperate last-minute attempt to evacuate his troops across the river to Gloucester Point by boat. This final desperate escape attempt was foiled not by enemy action, but by an unexpected and violent, almost providential wind and rainstorm. The sudden cessation of hostilities on October 17th signaled the inevitable end exactly 4 years after the great victory at Saratoga. The Earl's letter proposing surrender terms confirmed the strategic genius of the American commander's meticulously executed Southern campaign. The humiliating terms of the surrender denied the British Army the honors of war, a calculated retort for their previous conduct at Charleston. If the French commander had agreed to attack New York, the entire trajectory of the war might have been drastically altered forever. If the British chief had ignored the deceptive camps and swiftly reinforced the Earl, the Allied forces may have been trapped instead. The true significance lies not just in the battlefield success, but in the Allied forces' extraordinary triumph of logistics and timing. This synchronized arrival of land forces siege artillery and overwhelming naval superiority was considered almost a military miracle at the time. The persistence of the American commander, coupled with indispensable foreign aid, turned a desperate, lingering war into sudden victory. What lasting lessons can we apply? Never underestimate the power of deception and the logistical leverage of complete sea control. Furthermore, the siege demonstrated how decisive victory can finally break the will of a powerful, previously unyielding imperial authority. The war was decided when the last shilling ran out, confirming Vergennes' keen observation that this conflict was fundamentally one of hard cash. We observe the inherent weakness of a government like Congress, incapable of supporting its own troops with necessary resources or pay. Yet the Continental soldiers persisted through years of hunger, cold, and neglect, fueled only by their dedication to the revolutionary cause. The French officers viewed the American soldiers with growing admiration for their resilience, resourcefulness, and astonishing stamina during battle. They noted that men almost naked, unpaid, and poorly fed could still march well and withstand enemy fire, steadfastly defying logic. The French recognized the supreme confidence the American troops placed in the general, viewing him universally as their friend and father. The final triumph revealed an essential truth about leadership, character, and persistence often supersede conventional military brilliance in long wars. The British general in the South, despite his successes, became the unfortunate scapegoat for the strategic failures of his superiors. Ultimately, the victory at Yorktown confirmed that maintaining internal supply lines and cooperation is more vital than brute force alone. The fall of the British Earl quickly shocked the British Parliament, dramatically shifting the political will away from colonial conflict. The British Prime Minister's despairing cry, "Oh God, it is all over," accurately predicted the end of effective British control in America. Though peace negotiations dragged on, the military fate of the colonies was absolutely sealed by this single masterful Southern campaign decision. This is the story of how strategic intelligence, naval power, and masterful deception achieved American independence against overwhelming odds. Let us continue to examine these specific decisions to sharpen our own critical thinking and strategic foresight in depth. The British chief finally sailed with reinforcements for the Earl on the very day the surrender documents were officially signed.